Hey UConn Nation, it's KK Arnold here. If you're looking for the latest UConn women's basketball content, go subscribe to Listen Up to Phil and Ryan. Go Huskies!
Bill and Ryan, listen up. Thank you, KK. Listen up, home of the 12-time national champion UConn Huskies. And Ryan, in this video, we're going to discuss the news that we actually received earlier in the week, although it's kind of old, but it's kind of not, because I'll tell you why in a second. I looked at you and I said, Ryan, I think we need to discuss this. A five-star, according to SI, a five-star forward to visit UConn women's basketball. And when I told you, like, well, who's that, Phil? I said, that is Addison Bjorn, right? And you looked at me and you said, well, I think we already had a video about her. I said, well, hold on, Ryan, there's more. She's going to make an official visit pretty soon, although she has a lot of other schools, right, that she's visiting. So I think the visit's coming up because according to UConn Huskies on SI, right, this says that next up on her list is Iowa, which she will visit from September 25th to September 28th. So a beautiful Friday morning to you, Rye. This is September 26th. So I'm assuming she did not visit quite yet, but I think it's on the way pretty soon. And oh my goodness, you know about Sarah Strong, already being a great forward on this, a once in a generation forward for the Huskies, right? Man, when you think about Bjorn committing to UConn, this could be special. Whew.
Yeah, I mean, maybe maybe not quite at the level of Sarah Strong, but I mean, you never know. Bjorn definitely looks like a very talented player. I think she stands at 6'2", of course, a five-star recruit. I think she's ninth in the class of 2026 and ranked second in terms of small forward. So it would definitely be a huge help and a huge boost to the UConn Huskies' future if they do manage to land Addison Bjorn. Of course, UConn made her final list of seven schools, and like you mentioned, she's going to visit all of them, including Notre Dame, Iowa, North Carolina, Duke, Texas, Kansas, and of course UConn. So some pretty high-level schools that UConn has to try to compete with to land Addison Bjorn. But Bjorn said in an interview, she said, quote, she's looking for style of play and culture, especially relationships. I want to be close with all the coaches because that's where I'll be for the next 4 years. So I would say based on that, I think UConn has a pretty good chance of landing her if that's the criteria she's going with. It doesn't get much better anywhere else in terms of the culture and forming relationships with all the UConn coaches and of course all the players as well. We see how close this team is each year. So hopefully Bjorn gets a glimpse of that when she does visit on her visit coming up very soon. And of course, she still has one year left of high school that she's currently playing in right now or getting ready to play in. But last year, she averaged a double-double per game with points and rebounds, as well as 3.5 assists and steals per game. So, like I said, it definitely seems like she's one of the best players in this class of 2026. And like I said, it would be a huge pickup for UConn's future to add another player to that amazing front court that they already have. And so I guess now it's just a waiting game. We have to wait and see. Hopefully, we find out at some point during the season what school Addison Bjorn does decide to go to.
Yeah, so thanks to Dushan London, Bry said on X News, Addison Bjorn, a five-star prospect in the class of 2026, is focused on seven schools with official visits set to each of her finalists. So, right, man, that has to be tiring, don't you think? How would you like to travel around to seven different schools? I don't know. Rye would probably be sleeping on me for what, about 2 to 3 days in a row. I wouldn't hear from you.
Yeah, well, yeah, I have to imagine that is pretty tough, especially it seems like it's back to back to back 7 weeks in a row almost, or give or take. So I'm sure it is. She'll probably be pretty exhausted after her many tours over of all those different schools.
Hey, shout out to KK Arnold and the Arnold family. We hope they're doing well. Thank you again. A big reason why Ryan and I are sitting here today. Shout out to them all the time. Shout out to Nishant Gupta again on SI for bringing us this news. Ryan, in her junior season, according to SI, in her junior season at Park Hill South, Bjorn averaged 22.1 points, 11 and a half rebounds, 3.4 assists, 3.4 steals and one block per game while shooting around 56% from the floor. So Rye, I mean, 34% from beyond the arc. The numbers are there. And if you ask me, obviously, I think she could have a major impact on this team. And Rye, I think, again, so much depth we talk about in UConn, but is this really, when you think about it, is this really someone that we could not see maybe a traditional style player who maybe sits for a while as soon as she gets there and maybe make an impact pretty fast? I like to see it.
Yeah, I'd imagine if she does commit to UConn for next year, I'd imagine that Gino would want to get her in the lineup in some way, shape, or form,
Mhm.
with all the talent that she does have, even though there's a lot of depth on this team. But I would imagine that she would, probably not in the starting lineup right away.
No.
But I would think that she would definitely be coming off the bench and have a pretty solid role and getting around 10 to 15 minutes or so per game for the next season, 2026, if she does end up coming to UConn.
All right, Rod. They came through very well. They're still there for us. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all a lot. Hit that subscribe button, like, comment for us. Ryan, this will make you smile. They came through very well. They're waiting. They're waiting. I told you I was worried for a second. Why should I be worried? These are UConn Huskies fans. Ryan, they showed up big time for our last video. So we love y'all a lot for that. They went crazy with it. Ryan, this is just for you. Comment time. Jason D'Amico versus USC. AZ was ice cold. Probably one of the worst shooting woes she went through all year. So what does Gino Sitter? Nope. He calls her number with an elevator screen at the beginning of the fourth quarter to kickstart the Huskies as USC was making a comeback, and we all know what happened after. AZ can suffer from ebbs and flows, but nothing like a championship win to elevate her confidence and leadership. Let's not forget it was AZ that carried the team when it wasn't Page during the run. Peace. Hey, Rye, he makes a good point. And I took some criticism in that video. Again, to make stuff clear, I get it. AZ is AZ Fudd. There's nobody like AZ Fudd in the country, right? But again, I think I was more or less leaning on that. How do you fill the void of Paige Beckers?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty hard to fill a role like that, but I certainly do think that AZ Fudd has had her fair share of moments where she does go ice cold in some quarters of the game, and at other times in the game she'll score about 15 or 20 points in one quarter. So I think if she can become a more consistent scorer for her final season in UConn, and I'm sure that that's one of her goals for this season, being a consistent scorer throughout the whole entire game and not having those ebbs and flows like Jason mentioned throughout each game where, a couple of quarters she might start the first half, ice cold from the start of the game and really heat up in the second half. But yeah, I think we're all expecting a lot of big things from AZ for her final season, and I'd imagine certainly for AZ, but for the whole team as well. Winning a national championship should certainly give you a lot of confidence going into the next season.
Joyce Hurst said, my biggest concern for the Huskies this season certainly is not the talent available, and one cannot predict injuries, but I'm hoping someone will step up into the vocal leader that is definitely needed with the graduation of Paige. Good, though, to see you guys back for the new season.
Yeah, and I think it can be a lot of different people in terms of the vocal leadership. Of course, like we mentioned in our last video, that these comments are coming from the practice, that the open practice that UConn had. It certainly seems like the early contention for that vocal leader is Caroline Ducharme. Of course, she's been on the team for 5 seasons, so she's certainly used to what Gino expects of all the players, including herself. But yeah, not only just going to be Caroline for the whole season. I can certainly see it definitely being AZ Fudd, maybe AZ more of a vocal on the court leader, but I also think KK Arnold as well. I remember talking to her. We had that interview with her last season, and her saying that she wanted to become more of a vocal leader on the team, and she certainly did that last year. But I would imagine that she would want to do that even a little bit more as well for this upcoming year.
The disruptive one said, now this ride goes along very well with this episode. He says, we just won the national championship. Why no high school recruits since Sarah Strong? What is going on there? And I don't want to hear about Gino's age because to me, commitments are only for 1 year in the transfer portal era.
Yeah, it is a good point, but I think it would definitely put an end to all of that talk if UConn does land Addison Bjorn. But I do believe there's at least one or two more recruits that a couple players are considering UConn as well. That I think we went over pretty early on in the off season. But I'm really confident that UConn is going to at least land one or two recruits for the 2026 class.
All right, and a couple more, Rod. We'll go over to Gordon G. Hill. Thanks, Gordon. Good to see you. Way too early. Let's see who Gino has on the primary playing roster in January. Oh, so Rod, we just talked about it. We had breakfast together this morning, right? And we just talked about, or yesterday morning, mind you, yesterday morning, and I sat there with you and I said, Rod, a lot of big games early, right, on the schedule. But according to Gordon, he wants to see that roster in January.
Yeah, well, that's definitely where it starts to really matter. I think, it kind of seems like the theme throughout each season. I think Gino tends to play a lot more players going all the way up until December, maybe even sometimes throughout the month of January. But usually, once the calendar flips to the new year, so in 2026, the beginning of January, Gino tends to, not use his bench as often, I would say, and we can really get a sense for what the March Madness postseason lineup is going to be. But I would imagine, even though, like we were talking about, have a lot of big games, some ranked opponents early on in the season that we're starting off with this year. But I would still imagine that Gino is wants to play a lot of players off the bench to just kind of get a feel and a sense for what he wants to do with the starting five and the key role players that he wants coming off the bench for this year.
Yeah, one more ride. We'll go over to the disruptive one. He makes another good point. Chelly not being able to go is a bit of a surprise on the bad end, referring to Morgan Chelly. A lot of players that play the same position as her looked good, apparently, too. I think this is a make or break year for her. Get healthy, participate in a lot of practices, and make an impact on the floor. Not sure she will be able to hit any of these goals. Ooh.
Yeah, it's definitely unfortunate for Morgan Shelley. She had a great year last year during her freshman year, of course, all the way up until that really unfortunate injury. She had surgery all the way back in February, I believe. So I don't know. It's going to be tough, I think, for her to play. It's a tough injury to deal with. I believe it was her ankle, but I think it's going to be tough for her to come back from that and be able to play this season. But we'll just have to listen for that and see if we have any updates as the season rolls along. But I think for Morgan, it definitely would be nice for her to play at some point this year. But I personally don't see it.
All right, Ryan, you talk about we'll have to listen for something. We'll have to keep our ears and eyes open for that big name, right? The visit to UConn, I believe, is coming up here pretty soon. And hey, we have wide open arms, right? we will definitely be rooting for her to come to our side of the family. And Rye, all we can hope for, we are on standby alert. That's what we like to call it, standby alert. And you'll text me and I'll text you if we get that breaking news that the five-star recruit has in fact chosen UConn. Phil and Rye on Listen Up.